And, as somebody who more than frequently goes on and watches the town council, affordable housing has come up. And of course, part of the task at hand was trying to define what affordable housing was. There was also this interest in getting much more community engagement about affordable housing issues, and a task force was created. Could one of you kind of give me an overview of what took place and what the town wants to know from this process?
Sure. Well, to the town council's credit, they did appoint 18 people to Unattainable Housing Task Force. And the objective of that task force is to provide the council with objectives to further attainable housing production or affordable housing production, either way you look at it, through what would be a comprehensive housing strategy for the town to consider. Those could be land use and annexation policies that would further affordable housing production. They could be regulatory changes or the elimination of regulatory barriers that perhaps may be hindering the production of affordable housing. They could be in areas of how we can leverage additional local, federal, and state dollars to further attainable housing, how we can find partnerships. So this task force, they have been meeting since May. They have been educating themselves. I've been educating myself. We have heard from housing organizations that have talked about the housing need. We've heard from real estate developers about the challenges of entitling and constructing affordable housing units. We have heard from other local jurisdictions and some of their best practices. We have heard from other economic development organizations such as Holly's, the Easton Economic Development Corporation, and the Talbot County Chamber of Commerce. We are now at the point with the task force, we are actually now starting to formulate potential strategies that eventually we will present to the town council for consideration. I have to stress this task force is very diverse, and it was purposely formulated that way. And so we have 2 town council members on that task force. We have a county council member on that task force. We have 2 planning commissioners, but we also have an architect. We have somebody who represents a homeowners association here in Easton. We have a nonprofit housing organization. We've got someone who is from the business community. It's a really diverse group, and we've had great discussion, but our task is to go back to the council, we hope no later than October, with our recommendations.
Holly, what is the benefit of this kind of exercise? How can you, in your role, use this?
I think it's really helpful because we can educate developers who are looking to do a project here, whether it doesn't matter what kind of project is, but we can do a better job at trying to inform them of what we actually need here and what we're looking for. And as we know, I mean, there's always community input and everything, and council has to decide on what's right. And I think if they have some guidelines to work with, then it makes it easier for a developer to put forward a project that is appropriate. Because we've seen, obviously, there's been some battles over some projects over the last couple of years, right? The other thing is education. I think one of the biggest things that's come out of this is the need for education to the public, education to council members of both councils, education to the commission, education to just everyone in the community, no matter what type of capacity you work in, about how these issues impact what you do. So, and we have, obviously, a public meeting is open to everyone, but how many people sit and go, you know what, it's Monday night, let's sit and watch council meeting. Let's sit back and watch housing commission for 3 hours. They're not. And then when a project comes up because it touches their neighborhood, sometimes they come to defend why it shouldn't happen, but don't always have the information that is needed, or appropriate. And Safeway, for instance, there's pros and cons to that development. There are people for that development and not for that development for a range of reasons. And then they're coming to argue, well, it needs to be a grocery store. It needs to be this. That's not even an option. So let's not muddy the waters. Let's focus on what we're actually discussing. And I know that's not an affordable project, but it's part of the education process because we need inventory in general across the board. So I think the education piece that could come out of this, which can then turn into some marketing materials that can be put out there so that people fully understand what we can do and can't do, I think would be really helpful for everyone. It eliminates some frustration.
And so, Miguel, on that front, I mean, how does it help you in terms of planning? Do you feel like at the end of the day, we'll all know what affordable housing is, and we'll know what projects are in the pipeline?
Well, we know what projects are in the pipeline, and we know that the majority of them are not affordable. This task force is discussing what constitutes affordability, and we know what that means, and I'd like to explain that if I can. An affordable sales price to somebody who's making 100% of Easton's median family income, which is about $98,000 per year. At today's interest rates, with 5% down payment and factoring in some other costs, can afford a house of about somewhere between $260,000 to $280,000 and not have to spend more than 35% of their household income on housing costs. If you look at what's on the market right now, you could probably find maybe one, maybe two, 3-bedroom homes that are actually at that price. Our median income on housing sales, I think in the last year, was somewhere around approximating, I apologize, but somewhere around $450,000. We're creeping close to $500,000. In Talbot County, it's higher. We just don't have that housing production. And that means that the people who want to live here and the people who work here cannot afford to live here. They cannot afford to rent here, which rents for new market rate rental units are fast approaching $2,000 for a 2-bedroom home. They can't. Almost half of our workforce in Talbot County commutes from other places. The top place is Caroline County, the second place is Dorchester County, and the third place is Queen Anne's County. And when you have to commute, more of those household costs goes into vehicle maintenance and time, and for those professions that are making within that sort of moderate income range, that eats into their household income as well. And so it's a problem, and it has other detrimental effects to the community. We just become a more segregated community in many different types of ways. And so we have to decide as a community, is that what we want? Or do we want something different? Do we want to be welcoming to a variety of people who are in a variety of professions? And I think ultimately that's going to be the policy decision that our council is going to have to make.
Holly, don't you think, I mean, at the end of the day, though, this is as much a federal issue as anything else. I mean, this is, like it or not, it's now actually emerged as a campaign issue on the presidential level.
Yes.
And a lot of this depends on subsidizing those rents so that we can accomplish this kind of diversity, correct?
Yeah. I mean, in some ways that's what, usually if you have a project that's going to be affordable or some type of income base, there is a subsidy that's coming for that to help offset the cost of it. And it's actually not even a national problem. It's a global problem. Housing issues are issue globally. Maryland has had housing issues for a long time. We have a lack of inventory overall, and we've had a higher cost for housing. I can tell you, I came from the commuter. I'm from South Central Pennsylvania, and a lot of our workforce in South Central Pennsylvania works in Maryland. We had good schools, we had super cheap housing, and they commuted. And they couldn't find a place to live in Maryland. It also made it great in economic development to start recruiting those businesses with our different benefits that we had to come to Pennsylvania and relocate there. So we don't want to lose things that we have. So we do have to look at it from a state issue, and we have a special issue here in Talbot County by the fact that we have real estate that is generally of a much higher end and a very small inventory. We have a really small county, and people forget that. We only have 38,000 people. Like, the population of Easton is 17,000 people. That's a really small community. And then sometimes people go and try to compare us with something across the bridge. It's not comparable. We are still a rural.
I'm sorry, Holly. I do want to make a distinction, though, that there are potentially federal subsidies for affordable units, especially at the lower range, 30%, if you're making 30% or less of the area median income. And certainly under the low-income housing tax credit program, there are opportunities to have subsidies through that program to reach those making up to 60% of the area median income. But it's that 60% to 100% where there are not subsidies. When we talk about how do we generate more affordable housing into the community, it's not just at the lower end, but it's that middle section that is harder to get that assistance. And so the other thing, David, that I wanted to talk about on this issue, and it's at a much higher level discussion, but it's important. So if you look at the land area in Talbot County, if you combine the land area of Easton and the other towns, minus the little small portion that Queen Anne is in Talbot County, that constitutes a little under 5% of Talbot County's land area. The majority of future growth in the county, based on comprehensive planning and based on zoning, is going to occur in Easton's growth area. Once that growth area builds out, then that represents about 6% of the entire land area for Talbot County. So we have to decide in that growth area, how are we going to grow? How are we going to use land efficiently? And are we going to get public benefit back, not just on land value capture and property taxes, but also on affordable housing? So that's a really high level discussion that the task force is going to start having, but it's a very important one. So I just needed to, you do have to look out 50 years down the road in terms of growth, but it's really important that we set the policies and the land use policies and the regulations ahead of time to anticipate that growth. David, can I put a plug in for an event? The details are still in formulation, but August 22nd, which is a Thursday evening, at a place to be determined, we will have another set of consultants that we hired will be presenting to the community their work that we've asked them to do to look at land value capture based on the existing patterns of development in the town of Easton, and the different land value captures we have based on land use pattern types as well as densities. It's fascinating. And it may not appeal to everybody, but we do think there are people in the community who'd be very interested to hear that. And so look for details on that event that we will be putting out there as well as through social media. But I just wanted to be sure that your viewers and your readers are aware of that.
Well, I thought that was a great beginning. Thank you, guys.